Chelsea 1, Manchester City 1, tactical breakdown, let's go. Let's talk formations. Chelsea as usual set up in a pretty standard 4-2-3-1, with Petrovic retaining his place, Gusto and Chilwell acting as the fullbacks, Disasi in at right centre-back and Levi Colwill coming in to replace Thiago Silva due to injury. In front of them were Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo, and ahead of them was the informed Conor Gallagher. Palmer played wide right, Sterling wide left, and Nicholas Jackson down the centre. For the sky blue outfit we saw a few changes, but nothing spectacular. They remained in this 4-1-4-1 or 3-2-4-1 hybrid as usual. Ederson played in goal as always, with Walker, Ruben Dias, Akanji and Ake ahead of him, Rodri in the centre with Foden, De Bruyne, Alvarez and Doku in the four ahead of him, and of course Erling Haaland leading the line. Akanji for the most part would move into midfield to support Rodri, allowing for more possession, but would drop deeper when required if one of the centre-backs in Walker and Ake would go forward like we usually see from City. Let's look at the defensive side of both teams, starting with Chelsea. As we've been getting accustomed to in recent times, Chelsea dropped into a 4-4-2 formation when out of possession, and due to the large amount of the ball Man City had in this game, 71%, this tactical setup would be one of the defining characteristics of this game as a whole. The two wingers would drop back into midfield, creating a second bank of four in front of the defenders, leaving Jackson and Gallagher up top to press the City players on the ball when they were building out from the back. The width of the team would change too. Not only did we drop deeper, but we would become more narrow off of the ball as well. This made the centre of the pitch much more difficult to play through for our opponents as there was less space in those areas, and it's clear that the intention of this game plan from Pochettino was to limit the effectiveness of City's creative central midfielders, especially the ever impressive Kevin De Bruyne. Instead, City would have to go around the outside, play balls into the box from wide areas, and in theory we would have the advantage in those exchanges, with the very aerially competent Axel Disasi and Levi Colwill in the centre, along with Georgi Petrovic in goal, who is relatively good at claiming high balls. However, allowing free balls into the box is not a great idea, and thus Pochettino planned for this too. Those wingers that have dropped back would double up on the City-wide attackers, and with City's very centrally focused team, there often wasn't a man to overlap and support, as Walker and Ake were operating mainly as centre-backs in this system, and the supporting players were on the inside of the ball. Another ploy from Pochettino was to limit the amount of time that Rodri in the centre had the ball. The Spaniard is excellent at progressing the ball and dictating games, and to combat this, one player was tasked to disrupt the City number 16. That man was Conor Gallagher, operating in a hybrid centre-mid/striker role depending on what phase of play we were in. He was deployed to stand on the City man's toes, pressurise him all game long, and try to force errors that we could capitalise on. Now I think it's important to highlight City's defensive game plan throughout this game because it was also a key factor as to why Chelsea found success in this game and were able to create an equal amount of big chances as the Citizens despite having far less of the ball. The Manchester club would as usual play an extremely high line when off the ball. They would pressure high up the pitch in a similar formation to Chelsea's, a mixture between a 4-4-2 with Haaland and De Bruyne acting as those two up top, and a 4-3-3 with Doku joining them in the press at times too. The idea behind this was to not allow Chelsea to play a short passing game, limit the time our players had on the ball to assess their options and pick out passes, and force us to go long instead. In tandem, they played the offside trap for the majority of the game, and this worked on numerous occasions, Chelsea being caught offside a total of 5 times throughout the game. If any long ball did get through, they had the extra assurance of Ederson in goal, who would come out and act as a sweeper keeper, as he so often does, beating the Chelsea attackers to the ball and regaining possession. While City were in possession, the game plan was relatively straightforward. We've seen it numerous times from Pep Guardiola, but the end goal was to get into areas high up the pitch near the byline in order to cut the ball back for simple but effective shots on goal, especially for a striker the calibre of Erling Haaland. The main way they tried to do this in the game was with deep runners from midfield, providing an option in behind when the wide players had the ball. De Bruyne and Julian Alvarez would switch around to try and escape their markers, and make underlapping runs into the box to be that option. But for the most part this game plan wasn't working against the bastion Chelsea defence. Enzo and Caicedo in midfield would track these runs and worked incredibly hard to cut out the passes to these runners, and with the deep and narrow setup Chelsea had, these passes were much harder to pull off in general. Obviously, a team the quality of Manchester City was still able to get these passes through at times, and that's how they fashioned a few of their chances in this game. But they weren't one-dimensional. They did try to go around the outside too, with Foden and mainly Doku, with the latter trying to be direct and drive into those advanced areas. The issue was the doubling up of these wingers made this very difficult to do, and neither man really made many inroads on either side. Where City did get their chances from was actually balls into the box from wide areas, either from the wide attackers or deeper deliveries from an advancing left or right centre-back, where in theory we should have the advantage as I mentioned earlier. City's delivery was spot on as it usually is, and Haaland is the perfect target in the centre, and they made a lot of opportunities for the Norwegian. Luckily for Chelsea, he wasn't his clinical self in this game and just couldn't seem to get his efforts on target. Despite the numerous opportunities City had, it was actually Chelsea that struck first, with ex-City man Raheem Sterling putting the Blues into the lead. Chelsea were ultimately more productive despite having less of the ball, with our transitional attacking play looking far more dangerous than what City were producing. The way we created our chances was very similar to what we saw in the reverse fixture between these clubs. Long and direct passes up to our forwards with the aim of picking out runners in behind or to contest the ball in the air. Our aim was not always to win the first ball or make it stick, but to always win the second ball and strike City when they were pushed up high. In general, Chelsea made the midfield exchanges scrappy, snapping into tackles and disrupting City's usual calculated flow, winning the ball back in those areas and springing counter-attacks from them. But we also played through City a few times, with Cole Palmer being a crucial part to how we managed to escape pressure and play our way up the pitch in the few moments we did get on the ball. One of the biggest chances of the game came from this exact scenario. City press high up the pitch, the ball is played into Palmer from the back, and he wriggles his way away from a challenge and immediately springs a pass up to an overlapping Malo Gusto in behind. City's line is almost at the halfway line at times, and so the Frenchman has room to burst away at speed and play the ball into Nicolas Jackson for a chance that he ultimately didn't convert. We see almost a combination of the two happen for our first goal. It starts with City in possession, playing a ball from wide into the run of Alvarez in that inside channel into the box. The pass ultimately doesn't reach him and falls to Malo Gusto. He hits the ball long for Jackson, and though he doesn't win the first ball, he wins the second and with a sumptuous flick knocks it back to Palmer over on the right wing. Under pressure, he plays a pinpoint pass down the line back to the Senegalese, playing him in behind the advanced City line. In almost a picture-perfect copy of the chance he himself got earlier in the game, he passes the ball over to Sterling into the box, who checks back onto his right foot, deceiving Kyle Walker and slotting the ball past Ederson in goal for 1-0. This was right at the end of the half, and we'd have to wait until the second half to see whether or not Chelsea could retain this lead, and see if either manager had something up their sleeves. Most of what I have spoken about so far is what we saw in the first half, but this game drastically changed in the second half, and those changes are what allowed Manchester City to rescue a point and keep a foot in the door in the title race. We saw one key difference in the City setup in the second half, and that was the positioning and roles of Nathan Ake and Kyle Walker. They had clearly been instructed to commit themselves higher up the pitch and try to provide overlapping runs outside of Doku and Foden. This did mean that Chelsea would have even less players to get past when we sprung our counter-attacks, but it piled on extra pressure on our defence and gave our wide men another player to think about, and City another option to pass to on the flanks. And you'd think that City would stop there with the overcommittance, but in fact they were even more brave. Rodri and Akanji were interchangeably getting further up the pitch too from that central defensive area, and once again putting the squeeze on Chelsea and trying to make it more difficult for us to clear the ball away and or play it through them for transitions. This did work for City as they'd planned, but also did make us more of a threat when we eventually got the ball. They needed to get back into the game, and so this was a risk they were willing to take, increasing the danger of those counterattacks but reducing the number of them, with City getting even more possession in the second half and turning over the ball less. But it's the changes from Chelsea's manager at the 71st minute that really put the nail in the coffin. Until this point, the second half was not too dissimilar to the first, Chelsea defending well from City's pressure, limiting them to balls into the box from wide or long shots, but still posing that potent threat on the counter. We saw a shot from Gallagher go wide, a chance for Sterling saved by Ederson and Chilwell's follow-up also saved, another chance for Nkunku go begging, and then Enzo and Jackson getting in each other's way and messing up the opportunity. There were times where Chelsea looked likely to get a second goal, but all of that goes out of the window when Pochettino decides to take off one of our best creative sparks in this game in Palmer and replace him with another defender, Trevor Chalobah. As I mentioned earlier, Palmer was linking up our transitions. Most of what we did well in this game came through him being the player that was playing the balls in behind for our forwards to chase. Taking him off was quite simply a mistake, especially when his replacement was not a like-for-like change. An extra centre-back came on and we dropped into a 5-4-1, which completely nullified that attacking threat we posed on the counter. This was a foolish decision, and it's a recurring issue that we keep seeing from Pochettino. His in-game management is bizarre at times, and poor most of those times. This wasn't a last-ditch effort to hold onto a lead either. We had to play like this for over 20 minutes of the half, and against a team like Manchester City, they were always going to score. It was inevitable. I called it, the commentary team called it, and pretty much every fan in the stadium knew it was going to happen. With no outball, no numbers up front to pose a threat, we resigned to letting City have chance after chance after chance with no reply, able to commit those defensive-minded players further up the pitch with less fear now, and eventually they did score, like we knew they would. Another classic long-range winner from Rodri in that advanced position on the edge of the box, a deflection taking it past Georgia Petrovic in goal. It was so late on into the game that we had no chance of gaining 3 points, and it left a bittersweet taste in our mouths as the game ended. This was a real opportunity to gain 3 points against a really good team, and we just gave it away for no reason. A point against the champions has never felt so disappointing, but at least we can gain some level of confidence from this performance to take to the EFL Cup final against Liverpool on Sunday. We'll have to wait until then to see if Poch can use some of the things he's learnt from this game in that one, so if you like tactical breakdowns like this, I encourage you to watch one of my other videos on screen right now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, in the rain or in the dry, keep that blue flag flying high. Come on you Blues.